Do you know how much of your life is steered by things you've never dared to face? Every impulse you refuse to see steers your life in ways you don't realize. You might think you're in control, but the truth is, what you deny has a tighter grip on you than you imagine. Are you brave enough to confront what's really hiding in your own shadows? Because if you're not, it already controls you, shaping your choices, your relationships, and even the way you see yourself. And sometimes, what you call your goodness is just another mask for what you refuse to face. If you want to explore these truths deeper, like the video and subscribe for more. Let's be clear, society rewards those who fit its definition of good. You're told to be agreeable, generous, and calm, and people around you expect you to play by those rules. But there's a cost to all this. The more you strive to meet these expectations, the more you have to push aside anything that doesn't fit the image. That means hiding your anger, your jealousy, your frustration, telling yourself those feelings have no place in the person you want to be. It's exhausting, isn't it? This isn't just about being polite or helpful. It's about building a persona that keeps you safe from judgment, both from others and from yourself. Jung saw right through this. He argued that morality, as defined by society, often becomes a performance. You act out goodness to belong, to be accepted, to avoid rejection. But underneath, there's a whole layer of thoughts and impulses that don't just disappear because you ignore them. Jung called the shadow the collection of all the traits we reject in ourselves. That's the side of you that holds everything you've been told is wrong, shameful, or dangerous. And the more you deny it, the more power it gathers. Think about the friend who always says yes. They're the model of kindness, generous, accommodating, never the source of conflict. But behind the scenes, every suppressed frustration turns into resentment. They might never show it directly, but you can feel the tension. The backhanded compliments, the missed deadlines, the little ways they undercut others without ever raising their voice. That's the shadow at work. Or consider the person who prides themselves on being selfless. They give and give, but there's a catch. Their generosity comes with silent expectations. If you don't notice their sacrifice, the guilt trips start. Suddenly, their kindness feels more like a tool for control than genuine care. This isn't rare. He wrote that, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality." In other words, who you think you are, the image you project as calm, kind, or generous, is only half the story. The rest is made up of everything you've pushed out of sight. The more you suppress those bad traits, the more they influence you from behind the scenes. Maybe you've felt it. A burst of anger that seems to come from nowhere, a wave of envy you can't explain, an urge to sabotage your own efforts. Those aren't random. They're signals from the parts of yourself you've tried to bury. The problem is, trying to be good puts even more pressure on the shadow to stay hidden. And what you repress doesn't just disappear. Jung believed it gathers energy like steam in a sealed pot and eventually has to find a way out. Sometimes it leaks out in small, passive-aggressive ways. Other times it erupts in ways that surprise even you. The traits you deny, impatience, arrogance, selfishness, don't go away. They become strangers, waiting for the right moment to take over. Most people around you won't notice anything is wrong. They'll keep praising your kindness, your generosity, your calm demeanor, even as your shadow quietly shapes your actions. The agreeable friend is celebrated for their cheerfulness, while their resentment simmers underneath. The selfless giver gets admiration, but their manipulative guilt trips slowly erode trust. You can harm yourself and others without anyone realizing what's happening, including you. This isn't about blaming society for rewarding goodness. The real struggle is internal. It's about facing the fear of seeing yourself as more than just the good person you want to believe you are. Because if you admit to jealousy, rage, or selfishness, what does that do to your identity? Who are you if you let those traits into the picture? Jung's answer is simple. You become whole. Pretending to be all light and no shadow doesn't make you moral, it makes you blind. The less you acknowledge the parts of yourself you've disowned, the more unpredictable and potentially harmful you become. Goodness, without self-awareness, is just another mask. The longer you wear it, the harder it is to take off. But this shadow isn't just personal pain. It becomes lethal when you refuse to admit it even exists. Later, you'll see why denial itself is the deadliest trait. And if you've ever wondered where those sudden, unexplainable reactions come from, you're about to find out. Everyday life is filled with moments that seem harmless on the surface. But if you look closer, you'll see the fingerprints of repression everywhere. This isn't about dramatic outbursts or rare emotional breakdowns. It's about the subtle, automatic ways your shadow steers your actions, often without your permission. Jung put it bluntly, "What is not made conscious will be lived out as fate." When you push away uncomfortable traits and feelings, they don't just disappear, they gather strength, looking for any opportunity to slip through the cracks. Take the overly critical manager. On paper, they're organized, demanding, and committed to excellence. But underneath, their relentless fault-finding is driven by a fear of failure they refuse to acknowledge. Instead of facing their own insecurity, they project it onto their team, nitpicking every detail and creating a tense work environment. The manager tells themselves they're just holding people to high standards, but the real story is about their own shadow, one filled with self-doubt and anxiety they can't bear to admit. This is how repression shapes behavior. What you refuse to see in yourself, you end up seeing and attacking in others. You don't have to be a manager to fall into this trap. Think about the parent who insists on controlling every part of their child's life. They say it's out of love, but the real engine is fear. Fear that if they let go, something terrible will happen. They can't tolerate uncertainty, so they micromanage every decision, every risk. The child feels suffocated, but the parent feels justified. The truth is, the parent's own vulnerability is buried so deep that it leaks out as control. Their shadow, full of anxiety and distrust, finds expression in the name of protection. This isn't just about parenting, it's about anyone who masks their need for control as concern for others. These patterns don't stop with authority figures. Passive-aggressive behavior is another classic sign of repression at work. Maybe you know someone who avoids confrontation, always smiling and nodding. But later, you catch a sarcastic remark or a missed deadline that feels intentional. They tell themselves they're keeping the peace, but in reality, their suppressed anger finds a way out, just not directly. The shadow doesn't play by the rules of politeness. It finds its own route, often through subtle sabotage or emotional withdrawal. Self-sabotage is perhaps the most insidious outcome. You set goals, make plans, and then find yourself procrastinating, missing deadlines, or making choices that undermine your own success. It's easy to blame laziness or bad luck, but the roots go deeper. Often, you're acting out of a hidden belief that you don't deserve to succeed or that failure is inevitable. These beliefs are part of your shadow, traits and fears you've never faced head-on. The unconscious mind finds ways to confirm what it secretly believes about you, even if it costs you dearly. Here's the truth. Repression doesn't just distort your own life. It ripples out, affecting everyone around you. The manager's criticism crushes creativity. The parent's control stifles independence. The friend's passive aggressiveness erodes trust. And all the while, you tell yourself a story about being helpful, careful, or protective. You justify your actions, never realizing how much your shadow is steering the ship. And here's the danger. You believe yourself in control, while your unacknowledged shadow quietly calls the shots. You rationalize your habits, defend your choices, and ignore the mounting evidence that something deeper is at work. The more you deny these hidden forces, the more power they have over your life. Jung understood this better than anyone. He saw that the shadow isn't evil by nature. It only becomes destructive when ignored. So, what can you do? The first step is to notice the patterns. When you catch yourself overreacting, micromanaging, or sabotaging your own efforts, ask what you might be avoiding. What part of yourself are you unwilling to see? This isn't comfortable work, but it's the only way to loosen the grip of the shadow. Jung believed that facing what you've repressed is the path to freedom. What is repressed gathers energy, but what is faced loses its power. Tomorrow, someone's refusal to see their shadow might be the very reason you'll say, "I never saw it coming." Because the most dangerous trap isn't in the feelings you hide, it's in the belief that you're always right, always good, always above reproach. But what if that certainty is the very thing blinding you to your own flaws? It's easy to assume that living by a strong sense of morality will keep you on the right path. But there's a hidden risk when you start to see yourself as fundamentally better or more virtuous than others. Moral superiority is a defense mechanism, Jung said, creates immunity to self-criticism, blinding you to how you justify harm as virtue. When you're convinced you're always acting from the right motives, you stop questioning yourself. You stop seeing the line between genuine care and subtle control, between honest feedback and quiet cruelty. Think about the parent who insists their strictness is just tough love. On the surface, they believe they're preparing their child for real life, pointing out every flaw and mistake to make them stronger. But beneath that surface, something else is happening. This parent projects their own insecurities. Jung would say their shadow is speaking through their criticism. Maybe they never faced their own feelings of inadequacy, and now those feelings are redirected at their child. The parent truly believes they're acting out of love, but their child experiences the relentless criticism as wounding, not nurturing. The parent's conviction in their righteousness makes it impossible for them to see the harm they're causing. Now look at the friend who always frames their judgment as concern. They question your choices, your relationships, your habits, and always start with, "I just care about you." Maybe they do care, but often their advice is less about helping you and more about reinforcing their own moral identity. By pointing out your supposed mistakes, they reassure themselves that they don't have the same flaws. The truth is, this isn't usually a conscious strategy. They might genuinely believe they're being supportive. But as Jung pointed out, when you cling to the idea of being good, your shadow finds other ways to express itself, often through subtle acts of control, guilt, or manipulation. This is where the danger of moral superiority becomes clear. When you see yourself as inherently good, you create a blind spot. You justify manipulation as help, control as protection, even cruelty as tough love. You keep telling yourself the story that you're only doing what's best, never realizing how your actions might be hurting others. Jung warned that the more someone clings to an identity of virtue, the more likely they are to unconsciously express the opposite. The shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It builds pressure, looking for any outlet it can find. And it's not just about the obvious dramatic moments. The real trap is in the small, everyday ways you rationalize your behavior. Maybe you guilt trip a friend for not taking your advice, believing it's for their own good. Maybe you micromanage a coworker, convinced you're just being thorough. Or you dismiss someone's feelings, telling yourself honesty is always best, even when your words sting more than they help. Each time, you maintain your self-image as the good one, never noticing how your shadow is shaping your actions. Jung's greatest concern wasn't with people who openly admit their flaws. It was with those who believe they have none. When you're certain of your own goodness, you lose the ability to reflect, to question, to recognize your own capacity for harm. That's the real risk, spiritual blindness. You become unpredictable, even dangerous, because you act from motivations you refuse to see. The more you insist you're above reproach, the less you notice how your actions affect others, and the less you learn from your mistakes. The halo effect makes this even more slippery. When you see yourself as good in one area, you start to assume you're good in every area. You overlook your own negative behaviors because they don't fit your self-image. This disconnect grows, and soon, you're justifying things you'd never accept from someone else. You might even start to feel that you're entitled to bend the rules because your intentions are always pure. But intentions aren't enough. Without self-awareness, even your best motives can lead to harm. So why do we cling so tightly to being the good one? Sometimes it's about proving ourselves to others, but just as often, it's about convincing ourselves. The more you need to protect your image of virtue, the more you push your flaws into the shadows, where they can do the most damage. Jung believed that the only way to true morality is to confront your shadow, not deny it. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The more you polish your image, the deeper your unacknowledged flaws may run. Ask yourself, when was the last time you questioned your own motives, even when you were sure you were right? Are you willing to see the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore? Because the more you avoid them, the more they control you. All this leads to Jung's most chilling insight about the truly dangerous person. Coming up next, here's Jung's chilling conclusion. The most dangerous sign in a person isn't open malice or obvious cruelty. It's the refusal to see their own shadow, the total denial that they could ever cause harm or act from selfish motives. These are the people who insist, "I'm always the reasonable one," or "I could never do something like that." On the surface, they seem trustworthy, even admirable. They play the part of the calm professional or the caring partner. But what they deny about themselves is exactly what makes them unpredictable. Denial isn't a harmless quirk. It blinds you to your own behavior, leaving you at the mercy of impulses you refuse to recognize. If you've ever known someone who hurts others but never accepts responsibility, you've seen how this works. Every mistake is brushed off with, "I was just trying to help," or "That's not who I am." But the truth is, denial doesn't erase those traits. It only buries them deeper. A person who admits their flaws is at least honest about where they stand. You know what to expect. But someone in denial can justify almost anything. They rationalize harm as virtue, convinced of their innocence, while their shadow quietly shapes their actions. Take the coworker who undermines you during a project. They keep up a front of professionalism, but somehow your ideas never make it into the final presentation and your contributions are quietly forgotten. When confronted, they insist, "I'd never do that on purpose. That's just not me." Jung called this spiritual blindness. They've built their identity around being competent and fair, so any hint of competitiveness or insecurity gets pushed out of sight. They don't see their own sabotage as sabotage. In their mind, it's just a misunderstanding, something anyone could overlook. Or consider the partner who cloaks emotional manipulation in the language of love. Maybe they offer constant, unsolicited advice, steering every decision and making their partner feel dependent. They say, "I just want what's best for you," or "I only worry because I care." But underneath, there's a shadow they refuse to acknowledge. A fear of abandonment, a need for control, or a jealousy they can't face. Their denial keeps them convinced they're acting out of pure concern. Jung called this too spiritual blindness.